Support the Amigos podcast and keep the Amiga goodness flowing for just $1 a month. Visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
Amigos, the podcast about everything Amiga. Amigos is a proud member of the Throwback Network, your home for quality retro podcasts. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dowdy and John Bodovkar Schaller.
Hi everybody and welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today we are going to talk about North and South. But before we do, we've got a couple other things to talk about, Amiga-related things. The first thing is check our YouTube page because we just received our very first mail.
Yes.
Physical mail.
It was awesome.
A package in the mail from Norway. This is, we got a package from our Patreon. He's got a business called O'Brien's Retro and Vintage, and he sent us some awesome Amiga stuff. We won't go into a lot of detail. You can check out the video, but just a few things that he sent us was a Cannon Fodder cover disc, which includes a Sensible Soccer tie-in, a Cannon Fodder player's manual, an HP Lovecraft game for the Amiga, which I didn't even know existed.
This is now on the list, folks. We're going to be taking look at this somewhere down the line.
Yeah, it's called the Hound of Shadow. He sent us an Amiga CD with compositions performed or composed on the Amiga, and then also he sent us a Norwegian Blu-ray. We're pretty sure it's Norwegian, and it's called Commander Treeholt and Ninja Troppen. And so it
looks great.
Yeah, it looks great. It really looks good, and so I'm excited to watch that. Boy, just looking at the pictures on the back, I can't wait. So,
have you ever seen a Norwegian film?
Never in my life.
I think I saw a film once called it was a zombie movie, Dead Snow. I think that was Norwegian, but I can't be 100% sure. So, if there's any Norwegians out there that have seen Dead Snow, confirm or deny that.
So like I said, thank you again to
thank you very much
to Jonas over at O'Brien's Retro and Vintage for all the great stuff.
And your continued support.
Absolutely.
And if you're up in that area, please have a look at this guy. I mean,
if you're in Norway, there's no reason why you shouldn't be listening to this podcast while shopping at O'Brien's Retro and Vintage.
Yes. Tell them we sent you.
Next up, Aaron's got some Amiga 500 getting it going news.
No. Oh, you mean on the R's?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
What do we have? Oh, you lost me. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the diodes.
Oh, the diodes. The diodes. Well, folks, the diode situation is dire. Let me backtrack a moment. I have an Amiga 1084S monitor, which would be beautiful to go with this 500. The problem is, it blew up violently with smoke and flaming. I'm a decent hand with circuit board repair. I'd say I'm better than average. I did it for a living for a long time, and I've tracked down the problem. I think to one or two bad diodes. I mean burnt, and these diodes are tough to come by, and so we've had to go to Malaysia to have these things sent in, and we're going to give that a whirl. When we get them in, I'll pull them off. I've already pulled the old one off. We'll stick them in, and we'll see how it goes. I've looked for information about this particular problem and not gotten a lot, so I'm guessing this is something unique. Lucky me. But if it gets it working, I'll let you know. It's going to be a while, though. Like I said, these are coming in from Malaysia, so it'll probably be a couple weeks. But, hey, if we can get the monitor up and running, we can kick the 520 to the curve.
All right. So that is an update on what's going on in our physical Amiga space. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of hardware that's a little obscure.
All right.
While I was scouring the internet for news related to the Amiga, I found some information about a model that I'd never even heard of before called the Amiga 1500. Now, have you heard of the 1500 before?
I have heard of it. I know nothing about it.
Okay. Well, you've heard of the Amiga 2000, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, the Amiga 2000 and 1500 are very similar. The only difference is that the the 1500 sold with 2 floppy drives instead of 1 plus a hard disk. Okay.
Now, I don't know which is worse.
Now it was only released in the UK.
Okay.
And it was only in production in 1990.
What short run? Then?
So if you got one of these things, consider yourself lucky. It was what they were trying to do was Commodore was trying to hit the business market because I guess they were kind of seen in the UK as more of a games machine, and they were trying to really, convince business users that, hey, you can use this thing just like you could, an IBM PC or something like that. And they wanted to bring the price down to £1,000. And so I guess by removing the hard drive and adding in that second floppy, they were able to do that. Now, that in itself is interesting. The fact that Commodore UK thought that Commodore in America was just so out of touch with what their users in the UK wanted that they would specifically create a new machine just for their market. This is in this article that I'm reading. This is an article, by the way, by A. Stuart Williams, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes because it's just fascinating. It's also got some great pictures, but he talks to David J. Pleasance, who is the former general manager and last managing director of Commodore Business Machines UK. And he said that what they were trying to do is they're trying to make a machine that was palatable to the UK business market. They wanted to make it cheap, and they wanted to make it what they needed. It says that at that time, a lot of dealers were already selling the 2000 with the hard drive as optional, but it was just too expensive. And so this was kind of a stopgap, or another choice for business users.
Don't you find it odd that if you think back, this is before we had the modern tools to run games and whatnot off a hard drive. The hard drive on the Amiga was, I don't want to say it was useless. You could store pictures and but I mean, for gaming, it was practically useless. So selling the business machine with the hard drive out and then considering the 2000 a gaming machine seems completely backwards to me. It seems like 2 drives would help your gaming a lot more than the hard drive, and the hard drive would help your being productive and using your applications more in an office setting than having the extra drive.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's all got to be straight up cost cutting. I can't see around the reason to think that an office would want one without the hard drive.
And what's funny is that you could easily convert a 1500 into a 2000 by just installing a hard disk and then peeling off the 1500 sticker, revealing the 2000 sticker beneath it.
Oh, there it is. Wow. That's outstanding.
Now, that in itself is an interesting story.
So effectively, let me get this straight. I could go out and get myself a sticker made and then stick it over my 2000 sticker, and I've got a 1500 effectively.
Just take out, if you've got a hard drive in there, take it out, replace it with another floppy, and that's it. Now, that on its own would be an interesting story.
Yes.
But the rest of the story behind the story, is far more fascinating. Okay? So there was this company that was called Checkmate in the UK.
Okay.
And what they were doing is they were selling an upgrade kit for the 500 called the A1500. Okay? And what they were doing is they were taking Amigas that were sold they were taking Amiga 500s. They called them Batman packs because they were being sold really cheap with Batman.
Very famous pack. Yes.
Yeah. And they were adding in slots and things that were in the Flicker Fixer that were putting in the people were putting in that the 3000 had. And so basically what they were doing was they were creating a new Amiga on their own. And I guess you could buy it without the case or with the case. And they were selling an okay amount of these. And what happened was they went to Commodore, the business division in the UK, and say, hey, we're selling a lot of these. Would you be interested in buying our technology? And the Amiga folks looked at it and they said, well, how about this? How about we shut you guys down with a cease and desist? We take your idea and we implement it, calling it the same thing, the Amiga 1500.
Wow.
And that's exactly what they did. So they basically screwed these Checkmate guys. They took their technology, they took their idea, which was nothing but a positive for Amiga users, and basically just said, we don't need you. We can replicate that without your help.
They played hardball.
They did. And so, there's a lot more that I'm not going into just because it's such a long story. But the Checkmate guy basically said that they went in there just really wanting to help support Amiga. They wanted Commodore, they wanted Amigas to be used for business purposes, which is what the purpose of this thing was. And they noticed that, Amiga just seemed to be more interested in pushing the platform as a games platform than a business platform, and this was a reason how to do it. And Amiga just pulled the rug out from under them.
So,
or a Commodore.
To get this straight, these guys were making like a case mod for the 500 that added additional stuff.
Yeah, and from what I could gather, you could buy basically it looked like an Amiga 500.
Okay.
But they were able to add various things internally to it that would turn it into something closer to the 2000.
I see. Because I mean, I don't know if you'd have heard this. There was an outfit called, like, one thing I used to see all the time in the magazines was an outfit called Bodega Bay, and they would it was a thing that you plugged your Amiga 500 into it, and sort of like our Amiga here. There's a sidecar, but the sidecar connected to a drive bay, and it was like made it look like a big huge machine that would add a bunch of functionality to it. It's sort of the same thing.
Right.
And but in terms of Commodore jumping these guys and taking their business, that doesn't surprise me.
No.
People were predatory back in those days. Commodore, they weren't the first or the last to do something like that. And it was that sounds slimy. It's crazy though.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story because not only do you have this system that was only released in the UK for only 1 year, but it has this really fascinating backstory to it.
The funny thing about the Amiga, just to go off on a tangent, here you had a brilliant chipset and computer. Okay, it comes out in '85 or whatever, and then it seems like for the next 4 or 5 years or more, they just took that same basic concept and just wrapped anything they could around it.
Right.
And just they didn't evolve. And when they did evolve, it wasn't much of an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
One looks at the way computers evolve now. That I'll admit the PC market sort of stagnated. That once they hit the i5, i7, that area, they haven't done a whole. It's pretty much been the same stuff. But for the longest time, especially in the old days, you would see new processors, new generations of processors coming out every couple years, and it went fast. I think that was also a contributing factor to the reason Amiga went away. It's because you can't ride Atari, the same thing. They took that basic chipset from the 70s and they just rode that thing into the dirt. Mm-hmm. They didn't evolve until the ST came out, and by that time, they'd gotten past.
Right.
And this is another example. Here's Commodore. We want to make this a business machine. Let's see, and that's the wackiest plan I've ever heard. The sticker is. That's wacky. All of it's wacky, but it sounds like something a company would do that's out of ideas. Basically, right. That's what it. Sadly.
And just as one final PS on this, the article has 2 ads side by side that both appeared in Amiga User International in August of 1990. Even though the Amiga 1500 was released, Checkmate still continued to sell their A1500 add-on.
Oh.
And if you look at the size of the ads, and you think about how much ads cost to place, the Checkmate ad is a full-page ad versus the Amiga 1500 is just a little blurb. And so
vintage Commodore, they couldn't advertise either.
It's just really, really interesting. So please do check that out in the show notes.
That sounds like an awesome article. I'm definitely gonna give that a read.
All right, it's time. It's time for the vampire.
He's here. He'll bite you. Well, this is funny coming off that story because this is the exact opposite. This is heavy duty innovation on something that's long since dead. The vampire, it's undead. It won't go. No, I've been hearing a lot of talk about this accelerator called the Vampire. It's the Vampire 2, and so I've had some people ask me about it, and I've given it a cursory look. But I finally sat down and really had a good hard look at this thing, just because it has started to ship or has been shipping just for a couple weeks, I think. To give you an idea of what this thing is, the Vampire 2, it's an accelerator, and right now it's available for the Amiga 600. Strangely enough, it's odd that they would start with the 600, but what the heck? And there may be some reason behind it. I'm not sure. This thing is packed. Okay, what you get? First of all, 128 megs of fast RAM. That's a lot for an Amiga.
Yeah, when you consider how much RAM did the 600 ship with?
Yeah.
1 meg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Digital video output with the Picasso 96. An SD card for hard drive storage. This had been marked as a work in progress, but from what I'm going to read, this is something that's been implemented. It's a direct update core from the Amiga without the need for external programmer. What that basically means, you can update this thing without taking it out, with discs or having it hooked up to the internet or whatever. So I mean, and they've already released some updates, or they're in the process of releasing some updates. So I mean, this is something they're going to update to add functionality to effectively. And a couple of the future updates are supposed to have a FPU and 16-bit audio. Interesting. The FPU, from what I've read, is all but ready on that. This thing sits on top of the original CPU in your 600, and it basically takes over the whole machine. It's faster. This thing is faster than a Amiga 1200 with a 6860. Okay, it's what's awesome about it is this thing runs at like 500 megahertz or some ludicrous speed. If you ponder that for a moment, if you consider how fast the Amiga 600 ran back in the day, that's incredible. Incredibly amount of speed. They're going to try to make it so it can support 24-bit true color and full HD. Wow. Amazing. I saw some video of this thing doing crazy stuff. They had it running MP3s, which that in itself, if you consider MP3s are pretty processor intense.
Yeah.
Something that blew my mind, they had it running a Mac emulator that was running Duke Nukem.
Wow.
And it was running great. This thing flies. And from what I've been able to ascertain, it's fully backwards compatible with the 68,000 series. So all your old Amiga stuff should run just like it normally would. I obviously don't have one of these. I don't have a 600. But the good news is the next one in line they're going to be releasing is Wham Bam. It's an Amiga 500 version. I hear it's very close. And then after that, they're going to be a 1200 version. The price on these things is, if you consider what you're getting, and I was like, boy, let's see what this thing's going to run. Right now, the 600 version is $212 American.
That's about half as much as I thought you were going to say.
150 pounds. Apparently that went up a little bit from their initial estimates, but from what this fella said, I guess I can only guess that one of these guys is in Canada, because they said something about the Canadian exchange rate being real low, and that screwed up the price. The guy behind this, so at least it's the Apollo team. There's several guys in there. They're all have unpronounceable names. Gunnar von Bone is one of these guys. Igor Majstorovic is another.
It just
fella.
warms my heart to know that in this day and age, people are still being named Igor.
Yeah,
I love that.
Well, I'd say that's a more popular name overseas than it is here.
Unfortunately, that's
now,
what I say.
Get this stuff. This is what really I thought was interesting, is that the in future updates, this thing will hopefully, if everything goes properly, this thing will be able to have AGA on a 600 or a 500 graphics, and even something that's called SAGA, Super Advanced Graphic Architecture, which is
like
something that I guess doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there's no Amiga that wouldn't be on the AGA, right?
So it's going to be something. Again, sight unseen. I haven't got the chance to obviously fool with one of these, but I'm going to dig into it some more. I'm really anxious. So few people have 600s in America. I don't know about overseas. They're probably a little more common, but there aren't very many here. But there are plenty of 500s. And this would be, holy smokes, this would be quite a boon for someone that's got a lowly 500 to jump up to.
What will also be great is that if these things take off, hopefully that will lower the price of 1200s on eBay. And so the people that want those can get those, and the people that want to get 500s and upgrade them this way, then you can do that too.
The way that I read how this is installed, it reminds me of some things I've done on the old 500. It apparently just goes right in the 68,000 socket. They said there's no cutting of the at least on the 600. There's no cutting. There's no hole punching. There's not even wiring. I guess you just throw it in there and it goes. So this will be something to look into somewhere down the road. This is just a little preliminary look at it. It sounds interesting to me, though, and I will keep you informed as new products get released and develop.
Cool. Well, that ends our hardware segment for the week. We're always looking out for new things to talk about. So if you've got a tip, or you hear about a story coming in, then just write in and let us know, and we'll talk about it. All right, now it's time for our game of the week, North and South. So North and South, how would you describe North and South? What kind of a game?
It's a game that I question who it appeals to exactly. It's not deep enough to be a strategy game, and there's not enough action for it to be an action game. So it's sort of a not great at either angle.
Yeah, light strategy, light action.
Very light.
Game. And it was released in 1989, and it's another one of these games that just got a ton of ports. It was ported for the ST, the NES. That was the version that I was familiar with. The CPC, the MSX, DOS, the ZX Spectrum. No Acorn Archimedes, unfortunately, this time. I'm always a little saddened when the Archimedes doesn't get any love. What can you tell us about North and South as far as the behind the scenes, Aaron?
Well, it was again. It came out in '89. It was made in house at Infogrames, which their name always I find odd. I don't know why Infogrames.
It's like French. It's French.
Yeah. Infogrames, of course, they did. They did a lot of stuff. They did about 50 titles on the Amiga. They did a lot of Disney stuff. They did SimCity, which I believe you had a crack at. Mm-hmm. They did Tetris and Weltris, and they did a game that I remember called Drock. And it's funny, I looked over their list of stuff, and there was very little that I'd played. I didn't do the Disney stuff.
You know what I always think about it with Infogrames is they are the company that's infamous for buying Atari.
Yeah,
and,
that didn't work out too good for
them. Yeah.
I believe they did Alone in the Dark.
Oh, really?
I think they did Alone in the Dark, if you'll remember that series. That wasn't on the Amiga, but it was a very groundbreaking
game, yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft-inspired game. This thing had probably, of all the games we've covered, it probably had the biggest team of people working on it. Listed, thanks to our good buddies over at Lemon Amiga, you had 3 people listed as coders. Again, it's time to butcher some names. Alan Nakachi, yeah, this is his game, and as was William Henneboyce. That was pretty much all they did, and then Stephanie Bodditt,
most likely Stefan,
could be, did North and South plus SimCity and Drock, and so did a couple other ones. Graphics, a ton of people worked, which is, don't you find that strange? There wasn't a ton of graphics in it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing some of these people might be listed for graphics that worked on the comic it's based on or something.
Well, that might be true, or it might just be, Infogrames is a big studio. They could afford to pay more people to work on games,
Yeah, I suppose you could be onto something there. A couple people on the list just did North and South, and one fella did North and South and Draken. I'm not going to try to pronounce these names, but this game was a lot of people's only effort, or one or two only efforts on the Amiga. The musician, you had two people listed. Charles Callett. This guy was pretty active on the Amiga. It's funny, I look over the list of the things he did, and I guess a lot of these are Infogram titles, but I've never played them. Action Service, Bargon Attack, something called Bomb Moraine Ocean. That's the name of it. Bobo, Combat Course, Draken, Goblins 2, Goblins 3. Have you heard of any of these games?
I have heard of Goblins before.
Metal Masters, Operation Neptune, Passengers on the Wind. Again, none of these.
Some of those sound kind of cool, though.
Sierra Soccer, that one I'd heard of. Sir Fred, the legend. 1010 on the Moon, that I've heard of. And Ween, the Prophecy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Based on the band, no doubt in my mind.
And then that's Stefan Baudet is listed on this one as doing the music for this, SimCity and Draken. I had a look to see how common. This game is not one that I had ever played, and really I'd only heard of and thought, meh. I thought it was just honestly, I thought it was a simulator for Civil War. That's what I thought it was. That's what it sounds like. I had no idea about the comic. I had no idea about anything. This game is pretty rare. I looked it up on eBay just to see what kind of action it was getting, and it's getting very little action. Good luck getting this in the States. Ironically, I don't know if this is even released in the States, to be completely honest with you. I have no indication to say that it was.
Well, I don't. It would be. I agree with you, because if you think about when you start the game and you choose the flags, you don't get USA as an option. Of course, English. They can go either way on that, but it might have never gotten a release here, which is pretty ironic considering it's a game about the U.S. Civil War.
Well, a lot about this game's ironic.
Yes.
The fact that it's a game based on our history. I thought maybe they'd give it a shot over here, and maybe they did, but I couldn't find any indication.
Well, it definitely got ported on the NES over here.
Right. Right now, there was only one of these available on eBay, and it was going for over $70, and it was out of the UK. And I'd only seen one sold recently, and only one for months and months and months. This is easily the rarest game of all the ones we've looked at in terms of being able to find anything about it. The one I found that had already been sold went for about $18 shipped. Again, it was in the UK, so pretty rare. If you've got one, you may want to look around, and it may be worth something. Again, it's not something we've seen over here. Again, this was my introduction to the comic strip.
Yeah, the comic strip is actually kind of interesting. It's a Belgian comic. And it's it centers on two U.S. cavalrymen, and it was originally published in 1970, and it's called Les Tuniques Bleues, or the Blue Coats, and it just seems, I'm sure that we make light of all kinds of stuff we shouldn't in this country, not that we shouldn't, but that we just don't know about, and when you think about the Civil War. And, the tragedy of the Civil War, having kind of a comic take on it. I'm trying to think of, I guess we've got stuff like MASH here.
Well,
Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything that was comedic, that was Civil War. The thing that comes closest maybe like F Troop, but it wasn't really Civil War.
The end of the Civil War was near. When quite incident.
And Civil War is not considered funny here.
Right, exactly.
Or wacky. It's funny because other wars are considered funny, like you said, but not the Civil War.
Yeah, and maybe it's because it was actually fought here, and so for whatever reason that makes us more, more sensitive to it. But you're right.
That's strange.
When you think about now, of course, MASH was not funny about the war part of Vietnam. It would just have to be set in Vietnam.
Korea.
Boy. Sorry. Nothing. I don't think there's ever been any comedies set in the Vietnam War. Good Morning Vietnam. Yeah. So, but Hogan's Heroes definitely, that World
And even
War
that's
II.
sort of wacky.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But it's just kind of interesting stuff like
And
this.
it's funny. I never thought about the Civil War. I mean, I don't particularly feel offended by it or anything, but I never thought of it as something that you would use to be a comedy.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little bit about, and of course, there's a whole, if you want to look up the comic, there's all kinds of references to that online.
That comic starting in '70, and the game was released in '89, I believe. So the comic must be very popular to have had to run to the point where it could support a game. And then I know they've released this recently on the mobile devices, so there must still be an audience to enjoy it now.
As far as I know, I don't have a date for when the series ended, so it might even be going on. I think
still. From what I was able to ascertain, it's still going on. At some point they changed artists or the direction or something changed. But from one of the things about this I thought was really interesting, and I sort of noticed that in the game about you don't really put much into apparently the comic is incredibly historically accurate.
Really?
Incredibly. Like these guys are real sticklers for that. Mm-hmm. And that's something it's known for. It's being very, very historically accurate. And in the comic, apparently, the two major characters, aside from being in the Civil War, they get sent all over the country on wacky adventures. They've been to Mexico, they've been to California, and they've been to Canada. And so of course, if you've got a comic running since 1970, they've probably been to the moon
right
by now.
Time travel.
It's interesting that someone in Belgium would be a student of the war to the degree that they would put their reputation on the line about the incredible accuracy of this. I mean, apparently that's a real hallmark of the series. I thought that was interesting.
That is very interesting. Now we turn to the game. The game, if you've never played it, I'm going to try to describe what playing the game is like. At the beginning of the game, you turn it on, you choose your language. You've got this guy blowing a bugle in some sort of a crazy rapid manner that just disturbed me from the get-go. At first I thought it was an error in emulation, and then at every version I played it on, it was exactly the same. You choose your language, and of course I chose English, and you're greeted with it plays God Save the Queen. And I was like, well, that's odd for a Civil War game. But then I realized that it plays whatever country you select, it plays their national anthem. Just like we mentioned before, the U.S. was not a flag choice here. We don't know if that's because it was not released here or they just used Britain to be English, which is fine. So after that, you get the way that you select your game options is kind of neat.
Instead of I like that a lot.
Yeah, instead of just having a kind of a blank generic screen to select your options, it's like you're being there's a photographer set up, and you've got these different windows, and everything is symbols based. Whether you want to turn on storms or the very politically incorrect Mexican. All of that stuff is you can either just gray it out or bring it to life. And then when you're ready, you hit go and it takes the picture and you're off to the races.
Did you ever click on the photographer?
No. What happens?
He gets like,
That's cool. I never thought to do that.
First thing I did.
So after you select, whether you want to play 2-player or 1-player or whatever, then you're greeted with this map. And depending on what year of the Civil War you've chosen to start in, you can start at the beginning. Things are kind of equal, and as the war goes on, the North gains more and more of an advantage. And you're basically looking at this map screen, in between various events. It's not unlike Defender of the Crown, where you have a map screen and then things happen. They're almost like little mini games. There's a couple other things that go on the map screen. Every state has a railroad line going through it. That might not be true. Maybe not every state, but the North and the South have an equal number of states with a railway line going through it. And as turns progress, the train moves across the tracks and it drops off gold into either the North or the South.
Which is supposed to represent taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, if your treasury fills up, you're granted another soldier. So these soldiers are like your pawns on the battlefield. You move them from state to state or from region to region. And, you're trying to capture the other person's territory. Again, not unlike Defender of the Crown. When two soldiers meet, when they go into the same area, you get a battle. Okay, Aaron, you want to talk about the battle?
Well, they're that's where the action kicks in, such as it is. You basically control like a cannon, and you try to shoot the other guy and his troops, and he's shooting at you, and your troops are running into each other, and sometimes there's a bridge, and sometimes there's not.
And one of the things that could have made this game a lot better is a more effective system of switching between your different groups of characters.
Because I had all kinds of trouble, gaining any sort of control over my guys.
The way that you do it by default is you're using your arrow keys or the joystick to move your guys, but then you're using the right shift button to switch. And if you can picture an Amiga keyboard in your mind, the right shift button is not, you're kind of reaching across your body. If you're in the middle of the table and you've got the joystick there, it would have made so much more sense to put that select on the left shift, and then you kind of got your throttle in your gear or whatever,
Or another mouse button.
Or,
anything.
And so so in the battle, the computer, of course, is excellent. He's switching between guys. He's leading the charge against you. And I just found myself on the defensive all the time. Just even trying to gain control. I'd run forward with my guys, and they'd all charge into the lake, and they'd die.
Yeah.
Or I'd try and cross the bridge with the horses. Only one horse would make it.
I'd have many times where I would just have to sit there helplessly as my guys were slaughtered.
Yeah.
I was like, whoop, I stink.
So the first little minigame, the battle minigame, which is the most, the one you're going to see the most, it looks nice. The graphics are presented well. The game moves quickly.
Sounds good.
It sounds good. When you first start a battle, you get a little cut scene of a cannonball flying across, and the attacking army going. Also, the cut scenes with the railroad, the train going, they look nice too. So that's the first mini game. The second mini game occurs when you try to capture an opponent's fort, and
this mini game. I thought there was something going on. I was like, "What is this thing screwed up?"
Yeah. If you have never played this game and you saw a video of the way that this mini game moves, you'd think, well, this has got to be something going on with the emulator, that it's running way too fast. But it's not. It's meant to go this fast. Your guy literally moves at just under the speed of light. I mean, he moves like a streak across the screen. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to catch up with this timer. On the bottom of the screen, there's a little graphic that represents you and a clock graphic. It reminds you a lot of the Three Stooges.
I knew it. The Larry with the radio.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
And
except far more
less fun. Yeah.
And that wasn't perfect by any stretch.
No. And so now, in the meantime, your opponent has the opportunity to have guys come out against you. And, you punch the guys and they fly up into the air. There's knives that are being thrown and stuff like that. But the whole thing just happens so fast that it's not any fun. It's really not.
No, it's almost like it just didn't program it right.
Right.
I mean, it's just,
right.
And it said, good enough.
Exactly. So that's the second mini game. And as far as I know, are there any other mini games? Am I missing anything?
No. That's all I saw.
Yeah, and so now there are other things that happen. There are storms that can move across the battlefield that affect different things. There is a Mexican who, if you read the manual, has just woken up from his siesta. And, it's very of its time in the way that the Mexicans are,
I know if you're playing the South, you'll occasionally get reinforcements if you do certain things. If you're controlling North Carolina, I think that's another thing I've seen happen.
Yeah, so things like that, random events happen. But overall, as far as I can tell, and I may be missing something, but I don't think that I am. That is, there's also a Native American, he might hurl a giant tomahawk at one of your states. And a sombrero, the Mexican, he's wearing a sombrero. It's, and so that's really it. That's the whole game. And it's just, a war on territory that you eventually win or lose. Like Aaron said before, it's not deep enough to be a good strategy game. And the action is way too bad to be a good action game.
Yeah, I thought I just was horrible at the game, so I went and watched a playthrough. That's it. I mean, I was surprised. Let's put it that way. I was surprised. And this game did pretty well. in terms of reviews, which is awesome.
It boggles the mind.
That's what made me wonder if maybe I just missed something, because I looked over the reviews for this thing, and it was getting, like, for example, Amiga Action gave it a 92. Now, I did see a couple of bad ones. Like the one for Amiga Games gave it a 2 out of 5. And it's only one disc. It's not a big game. It's just, it didn't do it for me.
No.
I mean, and the thing is, there was a game there. There was potential there to be something.
Right.
They
had a great license.
Yeah. It reminded me of, it's funny, these comics that are big overseas. Have you ever heard of a comic called Asterix?
Yeah.
That's very popular over there.
And another French one.
Me and my son play a game based on that, and it's fun. It's more of a beat 'em up type game, but they could have done it. They could have done something.
Right.
It's almost like they just said, "Well, here we go." And especially with all the people working on it, maybe that was the problem. I don't know. Maybe it was lost on me, but it just didn't seem very deep.
Yeah. And so, North and South, check it out. Look at a playthrough on YouTube before you go through the trouble of, downloading it and all that stuff. If you've got a physical copy, though, hey, you got some money in your pocket. So, that's unfortunately that's our review on this one.
Yeah, sorry guys.
They all can't be winners, but that's how it goes. Anyway, speaking of next week.
You were speaking of next week?
I'm just looking forward. What do you think about doing wings?
Yes, I've been waiting to do CinemaWare's wings for quite a while, so we're going to get it out of the way next week.
All right, that sounds good. We'd like to thank our sponsors, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage,
yes.
Brent Dowdy, and Chad Halstead. Thank you for your support.
Thanks, guys.
And if you'd like to sponsor our podcast, help keep the lights on, check us out over at patreon.com/Amigos podcast. And we'll see you next time. Until next week,
adios.